Welcome and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, How SolarWinds Can Help with Your Digital Transformation Strategy. I'm Mark Smith on the Government Marketing team and I'll be the host for today's event. We'll get started in a moment, but first let's cover a few housekeeping items. The webcast is being recorded and will be sent out in a few days along with the slides. Phones are muted and participants are encouraged to type questions into the Q&A tab on the right side of your screen. I'd also like to introduce Sean Martinez from the Government Sales Engineering team. He'll be presenting our content today. Sean, take it from here.
Thank you, Mark. As mentioned, my name is Sean Martinez, and I'm the Technical Account Manager here at SolarWinds. As mentioned, today we're going to be talking about how SolarWinds can help you for data transformation. Real quick here's some of my contact information. There'll also be information at the end too, in case you have any other questions. Here's real quick the agenda that we'll be going over. Real quick, like I mentioned, we're going to be covering digital transformation, trends, drivers, things to look at, because there are things that might be drivers, things that we are executing on, things that we are maybe are on kind of the horizon that we're trying to identify, things that we are having to quickly or expeditedly looking on identifying to implement and then transform. And when we have a lot of things of this nature, especially of a speedy nature, we have that's where we have a lot of issues as to compliance, user performance, moving customers or end users over to systems. And so definitely being able to visualize to ensure, first off, are your applications up and available? Are what we're trying to serve to our end users, the information, the data, the websites, is that freely accessibly available? Is that secured? Who has access to it? So that way, in case there is things like a accessibility issue because people are suddenly, pouring over to certain sites or certain pages because of maybe some very important, pertinent information needs to be accessible to the masses, or because of something happening on the system because someone accessed, unfortunately, an application which was malware. And so being able to identify what's going on with performance so that way we can help to separate the issue of, is a performance issue of resources or because of a malware problem. We actually have a lot of these abilities to help you identify, sort, and help you to definitely detect and protect with our systems. And we're definitely talking through a lot of our demonstrations here, as well as having a lot of resources in Q&A here at the end of the system. Now, here, SolarWinds at a glance, we were founded in 1999. Originally, we were actually founded for responding to an issue at that time, Y2K. SolarWinds was known for 3 tools: WatchIt, Cisco Y2K Monitor, and another tool so that we can monitor, make sure what's going on in your infrastructure systems were up and being monitored. So we definitely monitored or we've grown from those basic network monitoring tools to encapsulate other areas as to systems management, monitoring, application monitoring, virtualization, storage, whether it's also in the database realm, looking at the application as a programmable level to let us know the separation as to responsibility, availability, performance, and actually kind of be able to also centralize all this together into one or a few platforms. And so that's the reason why one of the things that we have is our 60-plus products that really kind of grown to, like I said, there's about 3 or 4 full platforms we have actually in our tool sets, so that way we can go ahead and visualize, report to you what's going on with the system, with your infrastructure, with your endpoints, with your, like I said, with your customers. Those systems could be network devices. I have a lot of customers that also have environmental systems. So that's where I always tell customers to look into our forum sites, and because with our community, customers kind of take our products outside of the basic, what we kind of show you with the standard installations so that you can customize it to your environment, to your situational needs, because the situational picture about your area of responsibility is always representative about obviously who's coming to your desk, about what's going on with this system, application, endpoints. So you definitely want to get that visibility so that you're not having to go run down some rabbit hole for those performance issues. And we definitely have it being monitored by a lot of customers. I think top 500 Fortune 500 companies. And one of the things we actually have with our tools is that they're designed to be, designed or geek built. So the reason why I mentioned about the forum site is so that you can, submit feature requests, look to see about solving problems. We try to give you a lot of things to do with our products, because here in our webinar, I'll be talking on different concepts or specific areas as to the different products. But then maybe we want to look into different concepts or different implementations. Definitely look into our forum site. Also, there's the ability for you to submit features, like I mentioned. And that's the reason why. That's actually one of the reasons why we actually try to build our products really simple and powerful. We actually kind of have our UX team on that site too. So if there's anything that you'd like to help build to make our products better, that's one of the things we actually help to grow with a lot of our customers. As I've been working with SolarWinds for the last 12 plus years, we've definitely worked with the customers as they've grown to monitor entire agencies, entire systems, because whether you are a military agency, you are state, local, federal governments, you're a small company, you're a mission system, a weapon system, maybe we're monitoring space information, just each one of those missions are different, and each one of those areas in your IT is very complex. And so making sure that we can handle all areas of IT, whether it's on-premise, in a hybrid environment, and then whatever that cloud might be, a private cloud, public cloud, and having that visuality and capability of giving you all that information. You can see some of the notable examples there at the bottom as to how we give you that visualization, network path, application stack, performance stack, application insight, network insights. And so those are kind of different areas that we can help you to identify what's going on with your infrastructure. Now, when we talk about digital transformation and trends, sometimes it's a bottom-up, sometimes it's a top-down, because it's because of the data foundation or where the data is available or where the data resides. Is because we might have to slowly move the ship. One thing when you have to work with the analogy of working with a large ship is you have to tell the front and the back, well, it has to move in syncopation with the system. And so by being able to move the data and making it available to everybody, because we can't just take the applications, the endpoints offline to make this information accessible or more scalable, and so we have to figure out how to kind of manipulate and move this information around. There might be also different trends or different areas that we're having to respond to, because regulations, the GDPR regulation, having to respond to maybe we have a STIG regulation capability, PCI, SOX, HIPAA, the ability for us to really identify auditing of who's accessing the information, where is it residing, source destination information, having the ability to log and centralize so that we can report what's going on with all those endpoints and systems becomes very paramount, because when we're having to work or suddenly implement these sudden changes, we then have to we then suddenly forget about areas of suddenly like I said, cyber attacks might happen, or sudden loads on happening on users, and so we're having to differentiate what's going on with these different systems, so we can definitely scale out and properly handle your trends. Now, with the trend, like I said, sometimes it is a data-driven. Sometimes it is also leadership-driven too. So leadership says, hey, suddenly there's this sudden change, so we must implement. Sometimes in a very, very quickly, quick system. So really trying to figure out, how do we drive those online results. I always say at the end of the day, it's the time to market or time to production and implementation. That's the reason why one of the things I always say, especially with the SolarWinds and SolarWinds tools, when you have the ability of our evaluations, is that time to market, time to implementation, you can take advantage of with the with the performance monitoring. So that way we can make sure that are we getting that centralization, automation, reportability, alerting capability, so that maybe we're not in the office, or maybe we are having to respond to different threats or different areas or issues. We can kind of step away from more of the core infrastructure, the core systems, have the basic automation tasks kind of go check up and make sure that, hey, is everything online? Are we able to, first off, rapidly be able to continue what's going on with our mission or what our responsibility is, but also being able to continuously improve our footprint. You always want to make sure that you are always kind of growing, obviously, what the infrastructure is, and we are having to always kind of monitor, go back to one or two systems because of their problem children. It becomes obviously time-consuming issue. So by aggregating the performance, the logging, you start to then centralize to then understand, is it maybe a configuration issue, which then I always say at the end of the day, maybe we just need a reimage, or is it something more, kind of bubbling up across all the systems? Group policy, maybe misconfigured, updates, someone accidentally set access rights to everyone on a share. Having that visibility, so that way in case there is some sort of insider threat, outsider threat, really just any sort of thing that we need to respond to, we can make sure that it is identified and mitigated and basically sectioned off into its own segment of the system and not affecting the other area, the infrastructure. Because at the end of the day, it really does go down to the next point, which is that great customer experience. Because I would say at the end of the day, with your experience, your customer experience always comes down to there's two things, right? What you're told your responsibility is, but then what everyone else is coming to you for. I might be a network infrastructure person or a server application person, making sure that the network or the application is working. But at the end of the day, we're also making sure that they're able to maybe access through VPN, access through those websites. So looking at access control lists, we're looking at our VLANs, we're looking at our firewalls, we're looking at our process and service rules. So making sure that at all those different facets of really your RSI layer model, you're making sure that we are having good response time and availability. Because the next thing is, if we're not identifying what's going on at all facets, that resolution time starts to really extend, because we're then having to understand, first off, what is the picture of the infrastructure, or what do I own? If I don't know how the infrastructure is laid out historically, I have to then go research it first. And so by having all that information centralized into a reporting tool, whether it's like a network performance, server, application, or other, being able to go into that tool and report at scale, we're then able to then scale to figure out what's going on with the system, figure out, is it a small issue or is it a scalability problem, and being able to effectively to respond on demand. And at the end of the day, that really helps us to become cost effective, because we're not having to go hunt previous issues where we should really be implementing tasks, things that are obviously being thrown at us every day that might be occurring in the system. So some of the factors definitely take to really take a look at, or always from our perspective, is data management. Obviously data is obviously the one of the biggest beasts we have to handle, because the sensitivity of the information, the availability of the information, the permission to access, but then also the audit tracking of that sensitive information. As data gets older, whatever your responsibility data gets older, I would say that also becomes more of a scalability and security issue, because how are we keeping backups? Is it a 3-2-1 backup? Is it a on-site, on-prem, cloud, hybrid? Where's all that data located? How are we able to fail over? What if we lose access to the site? Is it how long would it take us to replicate this into the other in case we need to access it from other areas? And that's where we're definitely being able to not only make sure the back end of that data is available, but also the front end. And that's really the reason why we have, first off, we talked about user experiences at front end, but then there's that back end of that application performance monitoring. First off, we're always making sure that is the servers, services, processes, performance, performance counters of those applications, how well they're performing. One of the things that we try to do in our system is that we give you, we track the system, we give you a warning of critical thresholds, and then we kind of trend out the data out for you, so that way we can see, is it going up and to the right, or is it kind of trending down, so that, can we scale up, or do we need to scale up these servers to handle the more load that we're starting to see, or maybe can we kind of scale them down so that I can start making that or those resources available to the other mission critical applications that we need to definitely handle. And especially when we're talking about having to transform or implement changes very quickly, I always say that's where vulnerability and compliance kind of gets thrown to the wayside, because sometimes we're implement first, secure seconds, and so it becomes a problem of maybe the help desk is suddenly being flooded with tickets, or because of they suddenly need to get access to these remote shares that they never cared about, but suddenly the report system has to suddenly be there every Thursday or once a week. And so what sometimes will happen is the tickets will flood the help desk, and the help desk is just triaging. They'll just go open it at security, or give the permission access without understanding maybe they should have gone through a security group, or it should have gone through a proper secure channel. And so by having that audit logging at with the event logging, also the folder level permission level logging, we can then also see, like with our Access Rights Manager, when did that permission change, who changed it, and then having all that logging, because maybe that did open up a security vulnerability that we need to then have. But then the other area is obviously one of the areas that you obviously said was, our help desk is triaging tickets. So maybe if we had some sort of automation, right? So by creating, we know that what the process would be for getting that permission access, that security access to that folder, that share. So by having once again, by utilizing Access Rights Manager, we could go ahead and actually have a PowerShell script so that with these users, they're automatically defined to these roles, so that way we're not having to do these one-off type of triaging of tickets. And really, at the end of the day, because that's what we're trying to do, is create that connectivity for all of our end users to make this information available. And so definitely, always, like I said, some of the ways that SolarWinds always helps, first off, is always at the infrastructure level, because that's really that's our really the core focus that we always look at is the infrastructure as a whole, and then we always kind of roll up the end user at the different levels as we kind of roll up in the stack in the system. So when you're looking at your layer one, your physical layer, we obviously look to see, is it up and available? Are we able to physically connect? But then look at errors, discards at the traversal level of the link, looking at the actual packets, so we can look at the TCP UDP links to see what data is traversing those links. Going up to the next step, looking at the sessions that are occurring, going up to the application layer, and then grouping all those systems together, because at the end of the day, we might not have 10 systems. We're servicing tens of thousands of systems, or servicing several network locations. And so by being able to roll those up at the infrastructure level, gives us a great view of this full stack visibility. And then by overlaying that with the user experience of, are we able to connect through the network? Are we able to connect through websites? What is the website performance? What's that accessibility? Are we seeing a performance issue with a certain agent location? Is it across all locations? And then getting that kind of overlay with the infrastructure helps us to understand what's going on. And then once again, by adding another facet, which is obviously our security of compliance, network compliance, server compliance, whether that's patching compliance, registry access, group policy access, ensuring that we have that visualization, because if group policies are failing, it's just an event log in the system under application. You might not realize that, hey, half your group policies are applying correctly. And so by having the security event manager, or even our log analyzer, centralizing the logs together, we can then understand, hey, there's a group policy deployment problem. Suddenly half those workstations you sent out, they didn't get those group policy updates. Even when they connect the VPN, they're still not applied. They're open now. That's a problem. So centralizing that definitely helps. And really, at the end of the day, once we visualize all these different information, we definitely want to get a good support model, kind of leverage, because obviously, you have your front lines, your the phones, people either sometimes coming to them physically, calling in, or sending emails, or creating a ticket online. And so being able to triage those tickets, being able to first off make sure they're routed correctly, so that we are not having to arbitrarily just kind of accept and just kind of work through a ticket without realizing, hey, there's a security implication because I suddenly opened up permission access to a sensitive directory. So by having a lot of that visual or accessible through a help desk system also lets us know, hey, this user access, requested this access, so that way I have an audit trail once again about what was happening, when the user maybe came in. That way I have a visualization about maybe, this was why, instead of, maybe figuring out, was it a malicious or other access rule. And so, like I said, one of the things that we always will help you in here is, helping you to help understand, visualize, I always say solve the transformation issue, because at the end of the day, when we're solving the transformation issue, we have the existing, and then we have the hot newness of what's going on or what we're looking at. And so we have to always be monitoring what's going on now. Otherwise, when customers or users come to us saying it's not working, it's slow, it's having issues, we need to roll back, we have no data to roll on. And so by having our, the performance monitoring, by having that user experience monitoring, having all that historical in the SQL database gives us that true information of saying, yes, we are having some issues, but that might be because of security implications we've done, because of compliance, not because of the application. Because we might be doing a lot of different things simultaneously, because our security team is deploying those compliance policy rules that they suddenly got because there's a new security share vulnerability that came out for Windows SMB version 3. So they're suddenly deploying that new rule at the same time that there may be a new access control list rule. Suddenly everyone's on VPN, and suddenly there's someone lost access to a folder share. So suddenly a ticket comes in, and so without getting that information, suddenly you could have opened up an issue. And so that's the reason why I definitely have the ability of getting this information through, like I said, through server and application monitor, being able to see what's going on with the applications, monitoring the back-end performance of the application, so that way we can see the services, processes, performance counters of the systems, being able to make sure that we can access them from the back end, but also have some quick front-end access too. There's actually TCP port checks. There is a quick user experience for websites, web servers. You can do PowerShell scripts, user experience for DHCP, DNS scripts. So that way we can make sure that, hey, can we still resolve through DNS or DHCP? It's not a DNS issue until suddenly no one can resolve through DNS, or suddenly, hey, that certificate expired because we forgot to renew it because we were too busy deploying VPN to half the network, or because we were having to field out certain systems. So by being able to monitor and have all this information report to you, definitely being able to also visualize that, we can let you know what's going on, and then have all this information as that visualization. Now, we talked about application performance. This is where we definitely talk about visualization at the different levels. This is why I always kind of call our visual OSI layer model or our application stack visual model. Because what this is doing is kind of taking at the bottom layer, at the bottom right of this picture is kind of showing you your physical layer or your storage layer. And then at the top right is showing you your application layer. And so as you kind of go up the different layers, there you go from your storage layer to your, you might be virtualized, so you have your data store layer. So you also have your cluster, your host, your virtual machine. Maybe you also have a database, application, web performance, and then also the application, and then a group to central or group together common entities or common resources. So this is actually a dynamic dashboard that we build all into the our server and application monitor tools, so that whenever we are understanding what's going on with at the server level, the virtualization level, the storage, the database, or that website performance layer layer, we can see at each layer what's going on, but also have a dynamic map to go back into the different layer, because that IS issue could be because the data store was busy. Well, then I could just go to that data store and then move it to a different data store because there's other ones that are freely available, or maybe I need to move to a different host because it's in a different cluster. So all these different dots in here actually give you that quick click through, so that way we can go ahead and definitely visualize, troubleshoot, or identify and troubleshoot and just resolve and get ourselves back up and online. You'll also notice that there's also a lot of little exclamation points or caution signs. So those are also your thresholds. So by visualizing the thresholds, we actually take it a step further so that we're showing you not only when issues are down for potentially having issues. So that way you could set your service line agreements or set when we expect to start seeing problems around these areas. We can then identify as either color code or as an alert or a part of the alerting system. Maybe build an automation. So run that PowerShell script or rerun that just recycle the site, because hey, recycling the site or IIS pool seems to help resolve some of that performance issue. One of the next one, or area like I mentioned, one of the modules that I mentioned on the list was the Web Performance Monitor. So with the Server and Application Monitor, that was the back end of your server performance. The Web Performance would be more of your front end of the server service performance. This one actually looks like an agent, so it runs where it actually tests websites to make sure, are we able to see what's going on, give you a single pane of glass, be able to monitor the system and report it from multiple locations in the system. Then one of the other areas when we definitely look at websites or web systems is not only just looking at the the application, but understanding how it's working kind of behind the scenes. And so that's the reason why we actually added one of our first SaaS products, which is our AppOptics tool, which is our application performance monitoring application. This helps you to definitely get a full stack visibility, so that way you can kind of seeing what's going on behind the scenes with the programmability of the system. This website is maybe accessing that SQL server, and so it's going to be letting us know at each different area what's going on with the metrics and really in the trace logs itself. What is being leveraged by the web resources, maybe by Java resources, when is it accessing the database at what time, so that way we can take a look and visualize, where is it spending its, maybe the CPU or its time, why is it suddenly taking this 2 minutes to load on the system or the site that I programmed, because we're looking at the systems for, improving for suddenly, tens of thousands of users looking at this page, at your website or web page. And so being able to visualize the information, being able to see as users scale up and access your sites, seeing what's going on with the load and identifying where those, not really those faults, but really the latency gaps are, so we can help mitigate them. And that's really the biggest thing in here, is helping you to reduce that mean time to resolution, because like I mentioned, we're monitoring a lot of metrics and traces, but we help you to definitely visualize and give you all that performance information. And we're designed to really be highly scalable. And like I mentioned, this is really one of our first really programmers-centric modules or application that we have. So that way, because you have a website that you have for very sensitive information, you want to make sure your users are accessing, they can get that, and they can have that without performance issues. One of the other areas is when we look at the user access. Like I mentioned, we might be accessing data. So with relational data, we are always accessing. It's always going to go back to maybe a database like Microsoft SQL, MySQL, Oracle SQL, Sybase, DB2. We also have another one for Redis and other SQL systems. So that's the good thing, is that you have that ability of monitoring to see how are we accessing that relational data. Because, like I mentioned with the previous product, our AppOptics, it's actually letting you know what's going on with, how often it's hitting the system or the application or the different levels. But here, the Database Performance Analyzer, this is going to let us know how is it accessing at the database level? What type of SQL statements are we accessing? How often? How long is it taking? Maybe that SQL or sort procedure I created suddenly has 5 parallel processes. Well, the system only has 4 CPUs configured. Well, it has to have at least one processor for each parallel process in order to handle the system, or else sometimes it'll hang up. And so being able to visualize some of those SQL Server statements and actually reporting that to you, you can help to really understand some of your root cause issues. Also realize where some of your time is being spent looking at the data. Maybe adding something as simple as a where clause will help improve the performance of your SQL Server statements, clustered and non-clustered indexes. The Database Performance Analyzer will actually give you those recommendations as we actually kind of look and churn over all of your SQL statements and give you a lot of this information. And there's also a little bit of machine learning we kind of build in here too, so that as we're kind of churning through all that data over time, we know what to expect to see it after a couple of weeks or months, so that we say, hey, every couple of days or weeks we expect to see this maybe maintenance task or something happening on the system. So we already know that this is going to cause or invoke a certain disk or process latency on the system. And it actually does get you very detailed down to understand, like I mentioned, the SQL statements, really what's blocking those systems, so that way you can better design your database applications. And whether you created it in-house or really you're just supporting it or supporting a database, this is definitely a great tool, because I have a couple of database applications I'm supporting I did not design, but by utilizing this tool, I could add a clustered, non-clustered index, add a where clause, and suddenly the performance has definitely improved over time, and it's not impacting the other databases as impactfully as it was previously. One of the other ones in here is obviously when we talk about transforming is, monitoring the configurations. So, first off, we always want to see what's going on before we make the configuration change. So by being able to see, how the configuration was stored, what was going on, being able, as we're making those transformational changes in the infrastructure, having a real-time change detection, because maybe we have we're starting on this new process, and then suddenly 6 weeks into it, suddenly the application availability grinds to a halt, and we can't figure out what's going on. But by going into the Network Configuration Manager and by looking at the configuration changes as they were going on, you could then start to see that configuration drift of, hey, suddenly someone added a couple or removed a couple access control lists along this route, and suddenly that's when we lost that performance availability. The Network Configuration Manager, that actually overlays with one of our NetPath views, and you can actually utilize the NetPath as a end-user experience monitor, so that way we can see, are we able to access our certain sites or certain endpoints. And so by overlaying that with the Network Configuration Manager, we could then see when did that configuration change, and then did the latency change because of it? Or did we lose access to that port completely? So you could actually visualize that, like I mentioned, with the NetPath that we actually have in our Network Performance Monitor to actually let you know what's going on with the system. A lot of the other big one in here is definitely compliance, because suddenly we need to make sure that we have infrastructure compliance, but also making a lot of changes. So you can schedule changes. There's a full compliance reportability system in here, so that way we can report back what's out of compliance, and then have kind of a little report, so we can say, we need to maybe schedule to implement this at an access control list level, or maybe we need to define specific rules, so that way we can make sure these applications are working properly. There's over 100 templates in there for a lot of your DISA-STIG, PCI SOCs, but there's also a 30-minute video that talks just about this one in here. If you search THWACK NCM compliance, Destiny actually talks about this tool very more in depth, especially about going into compliance to meet those services for your infrastructure at the network level. Also, this does firmware upgrades. So suddenly, let's say we need to do an upgrade to meet a certain VPN or certain access applications, you can actually do a firmware upgrade through the Network Configuration Manager. Patch Manager is a great tool. So suddenly systems might be walking out the door. Suddenly systems are moving around. Suddenly we're having to figure out what's going on with the system, the patching levels of these applications. Like I mentioned, there's the SMB version 3 vulnerability that just came out. And so, maybe we have to go run out to our file servers and then update that to all of your systems. You should be having some sort of patching server like WSUS or SCCM. We actually have our patch manager, which rides on top of that system, so that way we can help you to centralize the patches, report to the Windows systems. So whether it's Windows Workstation or server, what patches are we lacking? What systems, or we can actually deploy the patches without an agent. but then schedule the patches. Because maybe if I deploy this cumulative update, it's going to require a restart, and I don't want to do that, suddenly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So what I need to do is make sure to schedule so that it's maybe implementing at 2 a.m. or at a certain time, so it's not running into some maintenance task. Suddenly now I've corrupted the database and I have other problems that I need to go mitigate. And so you can definitely schedule the system, also work on third-party patches, so then I'm not having to work on one-off installations. I always said really the majority of your time is working on one-off issues, so if I could try to centralize all the common applications like Firefox, Chrome, other browsers, maybe third-party applications, maybe I have Java, maybe I have CAD or some other applications. Being able to deploy that and centralize that gives us the ability of us to kind of take a step back and then just say, hey, go deploy it, and then no matter where no matter where it is, as long as it's connected to the network, it'll go and receive its patches. And so definitely the patch manager will be able to let us know what's going on in the patch system, set up patching, and also, like I said, scale and handle this agentless so that as we go into our updates, they can be handled pretty seamlessly. And as I mentioned, I've mentioned quite a few times through this webinar a few times, is centralizing the logs. And so that's where our security event manager comes in, because we were looking at centralizing logs of network devices, application logs, DHCP logs, Active Directory logs, VPN logs, workstation logs. It's difficult to remote into each system and check out the application or security events, but it's easy to log into a web console and centralize it. And so that's where our security event manager comes in, because you can definitely centralize it, correlate it, report on it, alert on it, so that way either I can go to the console if I need to, or automatically respond, so that way if someone plugs in a device to try to extract half of my file server from the network, I can then see what's going on, identify, and then either reject the drive, disable the user, suspend the system from the network. So you actually have a lot of different tasks that you can actually do in real time, so that way in case if I'm unavailable or if I'm having to work on other issues, these possible threats that might be coming in or attack vectors are automatically being identified, logged, and then mitigated whenever they might happen across the system. Now there's a lot of reporting in here, so it does cover a lot of your ITIL, but definitely does have a lot of your compliance reporting for HIPAA, PCI, SOX, STIG, FISMA. So that way we could definitely give you a lot of that out-of-the-box reporting of the logs, but also, like I mentioned, the actionable templates. There's over 500 rule templates, so that way we can actually take, do things with your systems or applications to actually make these changes. Next one is the Web Help Desk. So at the end of the day, when we have all the different systems, you obviously want to centralize it through ticketing. We have two options. There's Web Help Desk, and the next one is Service Desk. But the Web Help Desk is great because it's a simplified way for you to kind of streamline your help desk. This is designed around ITIL, around the ITIL process. So if your office is ITIL, this is actually designed specifically for that area, but definitely helping to automate a lot of the tickets. It also does integrate with some of your ticketing systems. But like I mentioned, one of our other ones that we have, which is SaaS-based, is our Service Desk. So this is just a different, or this is a SaaS version, or it's a little bit different than the Web Help Desk. It's completely different because it does the ticketing in addition to incident management. Also being able to do like categorization, just like Web Help Desk, but also do other areas like management of assets, and also give you a full service portal as well. Great. So I want to make sure I had some time here for the demo here. So let me go ahead and hit this finish. Great. So like I mentioned, we've been talking a little bit about the digital transformation. So at the end of the day, making sure we can see what's going on with our systems, making sure we can see what's going on, first off, with the infrastructure, and then the endpoints or the end user accessibility. So one of the basic things you'll see in here, kind of when you log into our Orion dashboard page at a glance, it kind of gives you, like I said, the infrastructural view of the system. So we can always see what's going on with the the systems, the performance of the systems. There's always a mouse over, so we actually have to let you know what's going on CPU memory-wise for on-demand. But let's say that we need to get a little bit more in depth about what's going on right now. I always kind of go over my top 10. This is why I always call my first cup of coffee view. So that way, in case I'm having to, visualize, understand what's going on with my infrastructure, where are my problem children right now, because maybe I have to I only have a little bit of time before I have to go work on the big fish. I can see, where's my saturation points, where are they coming from. Like this is showing us all our scheduled polling, so actually go into the system, it'll be showing me the system historically. One of the newer features in here in our network performance area in here is our real time. So it'll also show us what's going on right now as we're also troubleshooting. Now, one of the things I mentioned earlier was, as we talked about digital transformation, was seeing what's going on with the systems. So talking about things like infrastructure, we talked about configurations. So by not only just having that performance, but also the configuration history centralized, I can then see what's going on with the systems because, because of that configuration change, suddenly there's more CPU or more memory. Working with one agency right now, they have thousands of firewalls deployed across the country, and they because they obviously know the number of access control lists, the complexity of those control lists, that causes more CPU and runs into issues. And so they wanted to see what was going on. And so one of the things that they just needed was the configuration manager, as well as the performance, so that way they could see the configuration changes, as well as the performance, get that visualized to see what was going on for the reporting. Jumping over to the server and application monitor real quick. So when we're talking about digital monitoring what's going on with our systems, some systems might be on-premise, some might be hybrid or cloud, or we might be looking at or exploring into that cloud nature. And so we can definitely help to identify what's going on with those systems at all levels. And like I mentioned, we always want to start today or yesterday so that we can see as we go into the transformation, are we doing good or worse than before? And so by having the the ability for us to monitor the Active Directory, whether it's on-premise, maybe have it in Azure or moved it to Azure completely, we can report to you what's going on and report to you through warning critical thresholds. These are these types of problems we might be seeing with the systems. Here with IIS, like I mentioned, we might be monitoring your web servers. So when we monitor web servers, we monitor things like number of connections or your app pool, your CPU memory load, in addition to your SSL expiration. So all this information is all going to be tracked and reported in here into this page. So that way, in case there is a problem with the site, we can then jump over into the site to see, this one's in critical because maybe we are about to run, the certificate did expire, it's expired already, and so probably customers are already running into that error if they were to go to that page. Jumping from our server and application monitor, one of our next ones we have is our web performance. So like I mentioned, when we look at the website to web systems, one of the nice things about our web performance monitor is that you have the capability of flexibility. Basically, what you do is you create a recording. So I'll go ahead. There's a little video on here on our default demo, but basically what it says is you go create this, you bring up our little agent on your system, you tell I want to go to this page, click through the pages. As it's clicking through the pages, maybe you want to do text, image, or download verification, and additional conditional rules. And then what it does, it says, well, hey, as we go through these pages, we know the page should take, so long to load, but also looking at each resource within that page. Because maybe you have some social media integration, maybe you have an external site integration, where suddenly that site got inundated and suddenly now that's causing your performance issue because you didn't realize that integration was causing the problem. So we actually do give you a TCP waterfall charts so that way we can actually show you each resource on the page and actually visualize, this resource was causing, half the load time for this page, for that load system. And we can actually click into, you can actually click into it and it'll actually take you to the actual page itself in detail, we do also save a screenshot of the page. So that way, if you are trying to see, what page were they being served, or maybe I want to see about that service unavailable, or they gave my error page I was expecting, we can actually see that on the resource on here. Like I said, there's also the ability for you to deploy agents so that as we have more locations deployed, we can see, is this a localized issue, a regional, or more of a global problem that we're actually seeing across the agents as they're kind of monitoring those different resources. Or maybe as we're looking at the the different pages, one of the things that we're seeing is customers are complaining about the site, but it's not every page in the site. Maybe it's the first page or just the login page. And so because we are monitoring those different resources or different pages, we can see which one we do need to jump into first before we do that actual troubleshooting process. And like I mentioned, one of the things that we try to build into here is this app stack, application stack view, so that as you're kind of troubleshooting systems, you actually have the capability of troubleshooting what's going on. Under the home environment, there's actually the ability for you to kind of build your own or search and auto filter this way to see, hey, I want to look at this Exchange server, see what servers it's associated to. Or maybe one of the things we want to look into was, let's go to, I'll double click on this site here. So by double clicking the resource from that home environment, it automatically takes you over to that resource page. And then in the resource page here for like App Insight for IIS, I can then see a little bit more about performance information. But then there's also that dynamic map, so as I'm troubleshooting this website or this web server, I can then see, well, hey, this web server is reporting me performance problems. Is it really the problem of the system itself because of the server, or maybe it's because of the data store performance? Well, so if it is, I can then jump over to that area in here, take a look at its subscription levels. Maybe we're oversubscribed our provision. Maybe we're running into that depletion, and that's causing some problems. Well, let me move back over to that VM real quick, and then maybe I need to move to a different data store. So those all become little actionable areas that we can then figure out to then figure how do we help improve the environment to which maybe we're stuck with because that budget purchase for the new hardware is being delayed now. And so that's one of the nice things that you can actually do is give the performance, make the virtualization changes, but then also, like I mentioned, you can actually do capacity planning at the virtualization level, so that way we can actually let us know, how well do we expect to be planning to do, because, that system, maybe we do something we need to double or triplicate that server. So that's actually one of the things you can do is, like I said, create a report, whether it's a sustainability report with just the resources we have, or adding or removing hosts, where do we expect to see ourselves because of that expansion that we have to do on that application. Are we going to be trending up or down the next 90, 180 days? Because, I've just been told that my hardware purchase is now on a 6-month hold on a hiatus for other issues. And so here we can actually trend out to let us know when we expect to start seeing issues, and then what are some of the ways that we can help right-size the environment. That's where the virtualization sprawl page could come in, so that way we can then figure out like what VMs should I turn off, which ones should I reduce in space and size, which ones I could work with to definitely handle the load, or which ones we need to move, or could we take advantage of and kind of make some modifications too. And so this all kind of comes obviously into different areas of your transformation footprint, because you have obviously different ways or different areas that you might be looking into as you are making your modifications. Okay. One of the other ones I definitely want to make sure to touch on here was also our patch manager. So everything I've been showing you so far has been out of our Orion Web Console. The patch manager does have a tab in there. However, it's just a report availability view. Really, the real patch manager is in our application. And so what the nice thing about this is that this is actually installed on my workstation here, so I'm not having to remote desktop into my server. So in here, I can actually handle and work on all my systems, all my application, all my Windows systems, whether it's server or workstation, and like I mentioned, manage Microsoft as well as your third-party patches. So whether we have patches having to deal with things like, like I said, Firefox, Chrome, we can actually look at the update history, see what's needed, being able to approve from here, but then also being able to help remediate some of these systems. There's actually a remediate and maintenance repair utility so that we can get those devices back up and online. So that way we don't have to call them in or shut them off and have a sudden workload because systems aren't being patched properly. We actually do have some repair utilities to help you get those systems reporting. Like I mentioned, there's also a full searching utility in here, so that as I actually go into my different patches, we can drag and drop columns in here to see maybe which ones are superseded. So I only want to see, do this here. Yeah, so there's only just this one patch, so I can click to maybe approve, or maybe I need to decline that patch. Now, like I mentioned, with your standard patching system, when you approve, and it falls on group policy. However, with our patch manager, we actually give you this nice little button here called schedule. So that way, as we are suddenly deploying to your domain controllers or file servers, we're not implementing this and then every 22 hours or whatever you set in group policy. It's then you're then stuck with on those rules. You can then set that schedule, and there's a little schedule utility here in the Patch Manager application. You can then go in and modify in case you do need to cancel or modify any of those updates. And like I mentioned, there is third-party packages, so in case, let's say we need Flash, Shockwave, Firefox, maybe your BIOS drivers, applicate graphics drivers in here. So there's a lot of information, a lot of updates in here that you can actually have. Also, there is the ability and supportability for you to create your own. And so that's one of the nice features is that, here this is a Flash player one, but maybe I need to do a custom one, a custom package for an exe, an MSI, or MSP file. So we actually do have the ability for you to actually walk through the process, so that way we can then definitely handle the applications that you're having to then work with. If they are desktop applications installed on systems, we could then handle to terminate processes, automatically install, modify a service, run after if we need to on the system. And like I mentioned, with these third party, you can then just deploy. It's nice because all you have to do is hit the updates view. If you go in your standard checkup, your standard Windows updates, this Windows updates is the same one that the Patch Manager is actually utilizing. So like I mentioned, no agents that are required to definitely get this information back and forth, especially with these third-party ones, so that you can get those updates always configured. Okay. One of the other ones I definitely want to make sure we talk on was, like I mentioned, the centralization of events. So definitely a Security Event Manager comes in because we need to make sure that the access supportability and security is really being well defined in the system. So by aggregating your events, by correlating them, and also having those rules, we can focus on what's going on, who's doing what access. Let me pause this right here. Let's see here. If I saw something real quick, I saw USB. So real quick, I could go ahead and say, hey, no one should be attaching USB devices or systems. Where's this coming from? So I can go ahead and see system it's coming from, who did it, a little bit more about that log and system, be able to see, hey, people are adding or deleting files from the actual devices. So we can really quickly see a little bit more about those applications. Like I mentioned, at the end of the day, we have the event rules. So, whenever people are doing things like plugging in USB devices, maybe we want to automatically detach them because it's infected or something was executed. So having all these automated rules is nice because if I'm not in the office or I'm working on other tasks, the system is automatically maybe flagging, tagging, or taking the action, and then I can go and see what those actions were since they'll all be reported in here. Yeah, and like I mentioned, there's a rule template system built in here. So whether it is like USB, one for virus, file integrity, so file share, file access, file ownership, sensitive files being moved or deleted, those can all be monitored. VPN login failure, but I always say if it's just really authentication failure. If there's an authentication failure, it doesn't really matter where it comes from. I just care about authentication failure. And so you can actually see that about some of these systems, about where they're coming from, and then taking actions like blocking that system or blocking that IP address. And then one of the last ones I wanted to make sure to bring up on here was also our AppOptics. So our AppOptics is what, like I mentioned, it's our new SaaS offering for monitoring the application performance monitoring, but this is more at the more programmable level. You might notice that this is also a little bit different too, because this has its own website. Also has its it's nice here because it actually has the plugin, so you can kind of get some visualization about kind of some of the plugin supportability, about what it supports. So whether it's supporting web services, where we're supporting SQL servers, Docker applications, Docker applications, SQL servers, web applications. We have the supportability cloud applications could be monitored in here for performance systems. Really, the nice thing about this is that it's designed for the programmer, so anything that can be possibly monitored could be monitored in the system, because maybe we need to look in certain pages or certain resources. When we're looking at these resources or these pages, first off, you'll notice that I looked into this booking service page. So this is looking at you can see at the top it's actually reporting to us the response time of this page. So without me doing anything, it's reporting to us that it's higher than it was a week ago, and so where it's spending most of its time in the queries. And so you can see not only is it giving us performance information at a glance in a report page, but it's also giving us recommendations based upon thresholds and other areas of where we're seeing based upon its past period of performance. And you can notice that there's also other areas in here because about that visualization, because there's obviously the response time, requests, CPU, and error rate. Each one's giving you that reportability, but it's also letting us know, are we trending up or are we trending down, and where is it going, compared to a week ago. So that way, in case suddenly there's a change in something, we knew there's a sudden load on our website or web service, we can then see, where's that change, where's it happening. Like it mentioned, there's happening, suddenly all this performance is happening at the database level. So now let's go travel into the database to figure out what's going on, and then figuring out where we're spending most of our time in the database or in the system. We can then search more in depth if we need to, and have that in the system. There's also different areas for you to definitely visualize the infrastructure, so that way, in case we need to take a look at the infrastructure as a whole or individually, we can take a look at the performance at a glance. You can see I just real quick clicked on one of the infrastructure devices, but this is actually showing us kind of the infrastructure load as it relates to the system. So, CPU, memory, utilization of the system, requests, response time. So we can take a look at that response time and see, what's going on with the system. And real quick, you can see how you can add that to the dashboard queue. So in case you need to have that visualized later on, you can. There's different dashboards. So that way you can definitely get this metric visualization to see what's going on. So that way we can have just a great way of at a glance to see what's going on with your infrastructure, and then having that as a centralized resource. Great. So I know I'm trying to be cognizant of time here. So one of the things I want to make sure is, I know I covered a lot of different areas and a lot of different things when you kind of talk about transformation. There's a lot of things to just be aware about. We do have a lot of our resources available to you. Just be aware about our, we have a number of blogs there available. We have a blog, we have podcasts. There's quite a number of links that you see on our page. You will be sent this presentation later. There's also a recording, so you will also be receiving this. And then I'll also take a couple of questions real quick. I was running out of time. So, like I mentioned, if you have any questions, here's our contact information. Like I mentioned, email. And besides that, make sure we include our last contact details, how to find us on Thwack. Like I said, there's demos, free trial, everything. So that way you can definitely go test. I always say go test and implement in our evaluation, so that way you're getting the metrics or the information you're wanting to see. Like I mentioned, our information is all over here, so in case there is any questions, you see if we have that supportability, feel free to contact us. And thank you. And I hope everyone has a great day.